The stagecoach rattled to a halt before Owen Crawford's modest homestead, kicking up a cloud of dust that settled on the warm Kansas plains like a fine gold mist in the fading September sunlight of 1873. Owen stepped away from the fence post he'd been repairing, wiping his calloused hands on his worn denim pants before shading his eyes against the evening sun. This was the moment he'd both anticipated and dreaded for months, the arrival of his mail-order bride from Boston. "Got a special delivery for you, Crawford," the stagecoach driver called out, his tone tinged with concern rather than the usual jovial teasing Owen had expected. "Might need your help with this one." Owen strode forward, his boots crunching on the dry earth of his property just outside Wichita. At 32, he had finally conceded to the crushing loneliness that came with managing a small cattle ranch alone. After 3 years of solitude following his parents passing from influenza, he'd finally placed an advertisement in a Boston newspaper seeking a wife. The correspondence with Eleanor Vincent had been brief, but promising. She was 26, educated, and by her own admission, seeking escape from the suffocating confines of city life and an overbearing aunt. When Owen reached the stagecoach, the driver was already opening the door, revealing not the poised Eastern lady Owen had anticipated, but a frighteningly pale woman slumped against the leather seat, her chestnut hair plastered to her forehead with sweat. "She's been like this since we left Topeka," the driver explained. "Fever came on sudden, kept insisting we not stop or send word ahead, stubborn as they come." "Eleanor," Owen called softly, stepping closer. The woman's eyelids fluttered open, revealing fever-bright green eyes that struggled to focus. "Mr. Crawford," she whispered, attempting to sit up straighter, "I apologize for the inconvenience." Owen didn't hesitate. He reached into the coach and gathered her into his arms, surprised at how light she felt. Her traveling dress, once fine navy blue wool, was wrinkled and damp with perspiration. A small valise sat on the floor of the coach. "Get her bag, would you?" Owen asked the driver. "And thank you for seeing her safely here." Eleanor's head lolled against his shoulder as he carried her toward the house. "I'll be fine," she murmured. "Just need rest." "You need more than rest, Miss Vincent," Owen replied, his voice gentle but firm. "You need medicine and care." The modest 2-bedroom house that had seemed perfectly adequate that morning suddenly appeared woefully unprepared for a sick woman. Owen pushed open the door with his boot and carried Eleanor to his parents' old bedroom, which he'd prepared for her arrival with fresh linens and a vase of wildflowers. He laid her carefully on the quilt and touched her forehead, alarmed at the heat radiating from her skin. "Miss Vincent," he said, "I'm going to fetch the doctor. You rest now." Her hand shot out with surprising strength, catching his wrist. "No doctor," she whispered. "Please, I just need time." Owen frowned. "You're burning with fever. It will pass," she insisted. "I caught a chill on the journey. It happens." The stagecoach driver appeared at the doorway, setting down her valise. "Need me to fetch Doc Williams?" Owen looked at Eleanor's pleading eyes, then back at the driver. "Not yet, but if you tell Mrs. Summers at the general store I need some willow bark tea and anything else she recommends for fever, I'd be grateful." After the driver departed with a promise to send supplies, Owen fetched a basin of cool water and a cloth. He hesitated at Eleanor's bedside, suddenly aware of the impropriety of what needed to be done. They were strangers, not yet married, and here he was about to cool her fevered brow. "Miss Vincent," he began awkwardly, "you need to cool down. Your dress, help me," she whispered, trying to sit up. "I have a nightgown in my bag." Owen turned his back while she changed, hearing the rustle of fabric and her labored breathing. He only turned when he heard her collapse back against the pillows with a soft groan. Her face was flushed with fever, making the freckles across her nose stand out starkly against her otherwise pale skin. Owen gently placed the cool cloth on her forehead, noting the delicate features that matched the small daguerreotype she'd sent him. Though in person, even ill, she possessed a quiet strength the picture hadn't captured. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "This isn't how I planned our meeting." "Rest now," Owen replied, wringing out another cloth and placing it on her wrists where the pulse beat rapidly. "We have time for proper meetings later." Eleanor closed her eyes, her breathing shallow but steady. Owen settled into the chair beside the bed, prepared for a long night. This wasn't how he'd imagined starting his married life either, but as he watched over his unconscious bride-to-be, he felt the first stirrings of a protectiveness that surprised him with its intensity. Within an hour, Mrs. Summers's young son arrived with a basket of Remedy's willow bark tea, honey, a jar of her famous mustard plaster, and a note expressing both congratulations on his bride's arrival and detailed instructions for bringing down the fever. Through the night, Owen dutifully changed the cool cloths, spooned sips of the bitter tea between Eleanor's parched lips, and watched for any change in her condition. By dawn, her fever seemed to break slightly, though she remained asleep, occasionally murmuring words he couldn't understand. In the gray light of early morning, Owen stepped outside to tend to his animals, moving quickly to return to the sick room. His nearest neighbor, Jacob Wells, was riding up as Owen finished feeding his horses. "Heard your bride arrived," Jacob called out, tipping his hat. "Came to meet the lady who'd be crazy enough to marry your sorry self." Owen's usual good humor was absent as he wiped his hands on a rag. "She's ill, Jacob. Came down with a fever on the journey." Jacob's smile faded. "Doc Williams," she refused. Owen glanced back at the house. "But if she's not improved by noon, I'm fetching him regardless." Jacob dismounted, his face serious. "Anything you need. Olivia could come sit with her. Wouldn't be proper, you alone with an unmarried woman, even if she is your intended." Owen hadn't considered the propriety. His only thought had been for Eleanor's health. "I'd be grateful if Olivia could come, maybe this afternoon. I hope the fever will have broken by then." When he returned to the bedroom, Eleanor was awake, her eyes clearer than they'd been the previous evening. She'd managed to prop herself up slightly against the pillows. "Mr. Crawford," she said, her voice hoarse, "I fear I've put you in a terrible position." Owen poured fresh water from a pitcher into a glass and helped her drink. "Don't concern yourself with that. How are you feeling?" "Better, I think." She attempted a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes, though still not at my best. Owen studied her with concern. The fever had receded somewhat, but she remained pale, with dark circles under her eyes suggesting a longer illness than a simple journey-induced chill. "Miss Vincent," he said carefully, "I don't mean to pry, but is there something I should know about your health?" Eleanor looked away, her fingers plucking nervously at the quilt. "I was perfectly honest in my letters about my circumstances," she said finally. "But perhaps I was not forthcoming about my recent health." "I'm listening," Owen said, settling into the chair by her bed. "I had pneumonia this past winter," she admitted. "It left my lungs weakened. My physician in Boston suggested the drier climate of the West might prove beneficial." She looked up at him, her green eyes direct despite her weakness. "I didn't lie to you, Mr. Crawford. I simply omitted certain details that might have discouraged you." Owen absorbed this information, his expression thoughtful rather than accusatory. "I appreciate your honesty now, Miss Vincent. Rest assured, it changes nothing about our arrangement, but it does mean we need to be vigilant about your health, especially until you've fully adjusted to Kansas." Relief softened her features. "You're very kind, not kind," he corrected gently. "Practical, we made an agreement. I need a wife to help with the homestead. You need a fresh start away from Boston. Your health doesn't change the fact that we can be of use to each other." Eleanor studied him, perhaps searching for insincerity, but Owen meant every word. His advertisement had been straightforward. He sought a practical partnership, not romance. If Eleanor Vincent required more care than he'd anticipated, so be it. She still possessed the intelligence and determination he'd valued in their correspondence. "I should tell you," she said after a moment, "that the doctor in Boston gave me 6 months to a year if I remained in the city." Her voice was steady, despite the gravity of her words. He believed the country air might extend that considerably, but he made no promises. Owen felt as though he'd been struck. 6 months to a year, he'd been planning for a lifetime partnership. "I understand if you wish to nullify our arrangement," Eleanor continued, her dignity intact despite her weakened state. "I have enough funds to return east once I've recovered my strength." Owen stood and paced to the window, looking out at his small ranch, the cattle grazing in the distance, the vegetable garden in need of tending. the repaired fence line that had taken him weeks to complete alone. Then he looked back at the woman in the bed, her chin raised slightly in defiance of her circumstances. "Miss Vincent," he said finally, "I have no intention of sending you back east to die. You came here for a new beginning, and that's what you'll have whether it's for 6 months or 30 years. Tears welled in her eyes, but she blinked them away. "You don't even know me." "I know enough," he replied simply. "I know you had the courage to travel across the country alone, despite your health. I know from your letters that you're educated and thoughtful. And I know that everyone deserves a fighting chance." A tentative smile curved her lips. "Then I accept your fighting chance, Mr. Crawford." "Owen," he corrected. "If we're to be married, you should use my given name." "Eleanor," she offered in return. Then, with a hint of mischief despite her pallor, "Though most call me Ellie." "Ellie," he repeated, liking the way it felt. "Rest now. Mrs. Wells from the neighboring ranch will come sit with you this afternoon while I tend to some chores. We'll have you strong enough for a proper wedding before you know it." As promised, Olivia Wells arrived after midday, bringing chicken soup and a naturally motherly disposition that immediately put Eleanor at ease. Owen used the opportunity to ride into Wichita despite Eleanor's protests, returning with Doc Williams in tow. The elderly doctor examined Eleanor thoroughly, his manner gruff but kind. When he finished, he pulled Owen aside onto the porch. "Pneumonia's left its mark, sure enough," he confirmed. "But she's young and the air here will do her good. Keep her from overexerting herself for a few weeks. Build up her strength with good food, meat, eggs, milk. And for God's sake, get her married proper before the ladies' auxiliary gets wind of your living arrangements." Owen nodded, relief washing over him. "The fever, common enough after the stress of travel. It's breaking already. Just keep up with the willow bark tea for another day and make sure she drinks plenty of water." Over the following days, Eleanor's strength gradually returned. By the end of the week, she was able to sit on the porch rocker Owen had hastily constructed for her, wrapped in quilts against the autumn breeze, watching as he went about his chores. "You don't have to watch me like a hawk," she called out as Owen glanced her way for the third time in as many minutes while chopping wood. "I'm not going to collapse the moment you look away." Owen grinned, setting down his axe. "Can't blame a man for being cautious," he replied, walking over to check her teacup. "Besides, I'm not used to having such a pretty view while I work." A blush colored Eleanor's cheeks, bringing a hint of vitality to her still pale face. "Flattery won't get your mending done any faster, Mr. Crawford." "Owen," he reminded her, noticing the small pile of his socks she'd begun darning despite his protests that she should rest. "Owen," she echoed with a small smile. As Eleanor's health improved, they settled into an unexpected routine. During the day, Owen would work the ranch while Eleanor gradually took on small household tasks, resting frequently. In the evenings, they would sit by the fire, getting to know each other through conversation rather than letters. Owen learned that Eleanor had been a teacher in Boston until her illness forced her to resign. She discovered his passion for breeding stronger, hardier cattle that could withstand the Kansas extremes. They shared a mutual love of reading. Her valise had contained almost as many books as clothing, and Owen proudly showed her the small shelf of volumes he'd accumulated over the years. "My father believed education shouldn't stop just because we lived on the frontier," he explained one evening, 2 weeks after her arrival. "He ordered books whenever he could afford them." Eleanor traced the spine of a well-worn copy of Thoreau's Walden. "He sounds like a wise man." "He was," Owen agreed. "He would have liked you." Their comfort with each other grew, though they maintained proper boundaries. Owen continued to sleep on a pallet in the main room, giving Eleanor the privacy of the bedroom. The arrangement raised eyebrows in town, but the news that Reverend Phillips would be visiting the following Sunday to perform a small wedding ceremony quieted most of the gossip. 3 days before the wedding, Owen returned from town to find Eleanor in the garden, attempting to harvest the last of the autumn vegetables. He hurried to her side, concern evident in his expression. "You shouldn't be overexerting yourself," he admonished, taking the basket from her hands. Eleanor straightened, brushing dirt from her apron. "I'm not made of glass, Owen. Doc Williams said moderate activity would be good for me." Moderate, Owen emphasized. You've been ill. And I'll continue to have good days and bad days, she replied, a hint of frustration in her tone. But I won't spend whatever time I have being treated like an invalid. I came here to live, Owen, to truly live, for however long I have. Owen studied her flushed face, noting the determination in her eyes and the stubborn set of her jaw. In that moment, with the late afternoon sun highlighting the auburn tints in her chestnut hair, she looked vibrant and alive, not at all like a woman the doctors had given a year to live. You're right, he conceded, but we'll find a balance, and you'll tell me when you need rest. I promise, she agreed, her expression softening. Now, what news from town? Owen hesitated, then reached into his pocket. I got something for you, for the wedding. He pulled out a small velvet pouch and handed it to her. Eleanor opened it carefully, tipping a simple gold band into her palm. Owen, she breathed, it's lovely. It was my mother's, he explained. I had Mr. Henderson at the jewelry store resize it. I hope you don't mind a second-hand ring. Eleanor closed her fingers around the ring, her eyes bright with emotion. It's perfect, she whispered. But are you certain? This is your mother's ring. She would have wanted you to have it, Owen assured her. She always said a marriage based on mutual respect had the strongest foundation. Eleanor looked up at him, a question in her eyes. Is that what we have, mutual respect? Owen took a step closer, carefully taking her free hand in his. I believe we do, he said softly, and perhaps something more given time. The air between them seemed to still. Owen found himself studying the curve of her lips, wondering what it would be like to close the distance between them. But the moment was interrupted by the sound of approaching hoofbeats, as Jacob Wells rode up with a package from his wife, a wedding gift of preserved fruits and fresh eggs. The wedding day dawned clear and cool, with a crispness to the air that hinted at the approaching winter. Olivia Wells arrived early to help Eleanor prepare, bringing a crown of late-blooming wildflowers for her hair. Owen, dressed in his best shirt and newly pressed trousers, waited nervously in the main room as Reverend Phillips set up a small altar on the hearth. The neighboring families, the Welses, the Pattersons, and elderly Mrs. Simmons crowded into the modest space, bringing food and good wishes. When Eleanor emerged from the bedroom on Jacob Wells's arm, standing in for her deceased father, Owen's breath caught in his throat. She wore a simple dress of pale blue that Olivia had altered for her, and though she remained thinner than was fashionable, there was a glow about her that transcended her physical frailty. The wildflower crown nestled in her upswept hair gave her an ethereal quality that made Owen's heart race. The ceremony was brief but meaningful. They exchanged the standard vows, though Owen noticed Eleanor's voice trembled slightly at "till death do us part." When he slipped his mother's ring onto her finger, their eyes met in a moment of perfect understanding. This union might not have begun with love, but there was care and respect between them, and perhaps that was a foundation for something deeper. You may kiss your bride, Reverend Phillips announced with a benevolent smile. Owen hesitated, aware that this would be their first physical contact beyond the occasional steadying hand. He leaned forward slowly, giving Eleanor time to prepare, and pressed his lips gently against hers. The kiss was brief, proper for their audience, but Owen felt a surprising spark of connection that left him momentarily stunned. When he pulled back, Eleanor's eyes were wide, a becoming blush staining her cheeks. Around them, their neighbors applauded and cheered, unaware of the silent exchange that had passed between the newlyweds. The small wedding feast that followed was filled with laughter and good-natured teasing. Owen found himself watching Eleanor as she charmed their neighbors, displaying a social grace that his solitary existence had never required. Despite occasional coughs that she tried to hide behind her handkerchief, she remained animated throughout the celebration, though Owen noted the growing fatigue in her eyes as the afternoon wore on. Finally, as the sun began to set, he thanked their guests and ushered them out with promises to visit soon. When the door closed behind the last well-wisher, Eleanor sank into a chair, exhaustion evident in every line of her body. You should have told me you were tiring, Owen admonished gently, kneeling beside her chair, and cut short our wedding celebration, she smiled weakly. I wouldn't dream of it. Owen helped her to her feet, Come, wife, you need rest. The word wife hung between them, a new and unfamiliar shape in the air. Eleanor's fingers tightened on his arm as they walked toward the bedroom, their bedroom now, though Owen had already decided he would continue to sleep on his pallet until she was stronger and they had grown more comfortable with each other. Owen, she said softly as they reached the doorway. I don't want you to feel obligated in any way. Our arrangement was practical from the start, and my health, Ellie, he interrupted, turning to face her. I made vows today that I intend to honor, all of them, but there's no rush, we have time to find our way together. Relief softened her features. Thank you, she whispered. Owen helped her prepare for bed, turning his back discreetly as she changed into her nightgown, then bringing her a cup of tea and making sure she was comfortable before retrieving his bedding to make up his pallet by the fireplace. You don't have to sleep out there, Eleanor said hesitantly. The bed is large enough. Owen paused, sheets in hand. Are you certain we are married? She reminded him with a small smile. And I wouldn't mind the company, just to sleep, she added quickly, her cheeks flushing. That night, they lay side by side in the darkness, a proper distance between them, both acutely aware of the other's presence. Owen listened to the soft rhythm of Eleanor's breathing, finding comfort in the sound until it lulled him to sleep. As autumn deepened toward winter, they gradually established a new routine as husband and wife. Eleanor's strength continued to improve in the dry Kansas air, though she still tired easily and occasionally suffered from coughing spells that left her gasping for breath. Owen found himself attuned to the subtle signs of her health, the slight wheeze that preceded a difficult day, the flush that meant she was pushing herself too hard. Their physical relationship developed slowly, beginning with held hands during evening reading sessions, progressing to goodnight kisses that grew increasingly lingering. Owen was careful never to rush Eleanor, mindful of both her health and the newness of their relationship. But he couldn't deny the growing attraction he felt toward his wife, not just her physical beauty, which became more evident as health returned to her cheeks, but her quick wit, her determination, and her unfailing optimism in the face of her uncertain future. The first snow came in early December, transforming the landscape into a pristine white expanse that glittered in the winter sun. Owen woke to find Eleanor's side of the bed empty. Concerned, he pulled on his clothes and found her standing on the porch, wrapped in a heavy shawl, her expression one of wonder as she watched the snowflakes drift down. It's beautiful, she breathed as he joined her. In Boston, the snow turned gray almost immediately. But here, it's so vast and clean. Owen slipped his arm around her waist, drawing her against his side for warmth. Wait until you see it at sunset. The whole world turns pink and gold. Eleanor leaned her head against his shoulder, a contented sigh escaping her lips. I never thought I'd see another winter, she confessed softly. When the doctor in Boston told me his prognosis, I packed away all my winter clothes. I didn't expect to need them. Owen tightened his arm around her, his heart clenching at the matter-of-fact way she discussed her mortality. You'll need them for many winters to come, he said firmly. Doc Williams says you're improving every day. He's a kind man who tells patients what they need to hear, Eleanor replied without bitterness. But yes, I do feel stronger here, whether it's the air or... She hesitated, then turned to face him. Or the company, I can't say. Their eyes met, and Owen recognized the same spark he'd felt during their wedding kiss. Without thinking, he lowered his head and captured her lips with his. Unlike their previous tentative kisses, this one deepened immediately, Eleanor's arms coming up to circle his neck as she responded with unexpected passion. When they finally broke apart, both breathless, Eleanor's eyes were bright with emotion. Owen, she whispered, I need you to know something. He brushed a strand of hair from her face, his heart pounding. What is it? I'm falling in love with you, she admitted, vulnerability clear in her expression. I didn't expect to. Our arrangement was practical, but these past months watching you being with you, she took a shaky breath. I don't want to leave things unsaid, not when time might be short. Owen cradled her face in his hands. Ellie, he said, his voice rough with emotion. I fell in love with you watching you fight to get well. Your courage, your determination. I love your mind, your spirit. I love the way you refuse to be defined by your illness. Tears welled in her eyes. "Even knowing I might not have long, especially knowing that," he replied fiercely. "Every day with you is a gift, Ellie, however many or few were granted." That night, they truly became husband and wife, their lovemaking gentle and mindful of Eleanor's health, but no less passionate for it. Afterward, as she lay nestled against his chest, Owen felt a profound sense of rightness, as if all the loneliness of his past had been preparing him for this moment, this woman. "No regrets," he murmured into her hair. "None," she assured him, pressing a kiss to his shoulder. "Though I do regret all those nights we spent chastely side by side when we could have been doing this." Owen chuckled, tightening his arms around her. "We have time to make up for it." The winter months passed in a cocoon of domestic contentment. Though the harsh Kansas winter confined them often to the house, they found joy in simple companionship. Eleanor's health stabilized. She still had difficult days when breathing was labored, but the good days outnumbered the bad. She took over the household accounts, revealing a sharp head for figures that impressed Owen, and began planning an expanded vegetable garden for spring. In the evenings, they would read aloud to each other by the fire, or Owen would tell stories of his childhood on the frontier. Sometimes, if Eleanor was feeling strong, they would dance slowly to imagined music, her head resting against his chest as they swayed in the firelight. Christmas was a simple affair, with handmade gifts and a small tree cut from the property. Owen gifted Eleanor with a new woolen shawl and a journal bound in soft leather. She presented him with knitted gloves and a hand-carved pipe she'd secretly commissioned from Jacob Wells. "For when you're contemplating the mysteries of cattle breeding," she teased as he examined it with appreciation. New Year's Eve found them sitting on the porch despite the cold, wrapped in blankets and watching the stars that seemed close enough to touch in the clear winter sky. "What do you wish for in the coming year?" Owen asked, his arms secure around her shoulders. Eleanor was quiet for a long moment. "Time," she finally said. "Not just to live, but to love, to see the spring planting and the summer harvest, to make memories that will sustain you when." She trailed off. "When I'm gone," she finished softly. "I know it's difficult to speak of, but we must be practical, Owen." Owen swallowed hard against the tightness in his throat. "I wish for a miracle," he said simply. "I wish for years, not seasons. For gray hairs and wrinkles and grandchildren on your knee." Eleanor turned to face him, her eyes bright with unshed tears. "Oh, my love," she whispered, "what a beautiful wish." As if in answer to Owen's heartfelt wish, Eleanor's health seemed to take a significant turn for the better as winter gave way to spring. Doc Williams, making his monthly visit, listened to her lungs and sat back with a look of pleasant surprise. "Well, Mrs. Crawford, I'd say the Kansas air agrees with you," he announced. "Your lungs sound clearer than I've heard them yet." Eleanor exchanged a hopeful glance with Owen, who had insisted on being present for all medical examinations. "What does that mean, doctor?" Williams packed away his stethoscope thoughtfully. "It means you're healing, young lady. Slowly, mind you. Those lungs took a beating from the pneumonia, but healing nonetheless." After the doctor left, Owen swept Eleanor into a careful embrace, his joy tempered by cautious optimism. "Did you hear him, Ellie? You're healing." Eleanor's smile was radiant. "I've felt it, Owen, these past few weeks especially. I can breathe deeper, work longer before tiring." She pressed her hand to his cheek. "Perhaps we'll have those years after all." Spring brought new life to the Crawford ranch. The vegetable garden Eleanor had planned was planted, twice the size of Owen's previous efforts. She spent hours tending it, her wide-brimmed hat protecting her from the strengthening sun as she carefully cultivated rows of beans, corn, tomatoes, and squash. Owen found himself watching her often as she worked, marveling at the transformation from the deathly ill woman who'd arrived on his doorstep. Though still slim, she had filled out, her movements stronger and more assured. The persistent cough hadn't disappeared entirely, but it troubled her less frequently. With Eleanor's improved health came increased activity in the community. The ladies of Wichita, initially skeptical of the Eastern mail-order bride, were won over by Eleanor's genuine warmth and intelligence. She joined the church auxiliary and began tutoring several local children whose education had been interrupted by the demands of frontier life. "You miss teaching," Owen observed one evening as Eleanor prepared lessons for the following day. She looked up, a soft smile playing on her lips. "I do. Though I never imagined having a schoolroom quite like this." She gestured to the kitchen table where her books and papers were spread out. "We could build you a proper schoolhouse," Owen suggested, half serious. "The community needs one. Most of the children get spotty education at best." Eleanor's eyes widened. "Do you really think it would be possible?" "Anything's possible," Owen replied, reaching across the table to take her hand. "Especially now that we have more hope for the future." The idea took root, and by early summer, plans were underway for a small schoolhouse to be built on the edge of the Crawford property. The men of the surrounding farms volunteered labor, grateful for the prospect of consistent education for their children. "You realize this means we'll have children running about the property every day," Owen teased as they watched the foundation being laid. "I can think of worse fates," Eleanor replied, a wistful note in her voice that caught Owen's attention. "Ellie," he prompted gently. She looked up at him, vulnerability clear in her expression. "I always wanted children of my own," she admitted softly. "Before I fell ill, I imagined a houseful, but now, even with my health improving, I don't know if it would be wise or even possible." Owen wrapped his arm around her waist, drawing her close. "Have you spoken to Doc Williams about it?" She shook her head. "I've been afraid to ask, afraid of the answer." "Then we'll ask together," Owen decided. "At his next visit, and whatever he says, we'll face it together." Doc Williams's assessment was cautiously optimistic. "Your lungs are continuing to improve, Mrs. Crawford, but pregnancy puts a tremendous strain on a woman's body," he explained. "I wouldn't advise it immediately, but perhaps in another year if your health continues to strengthen." It might be possible. Hope blossomed in Eleanor's eyes. "Truly," the doctor nodded, his expression softening. "Nature has a way of surprising us, young lady. You've already defied the predictions of your Boston physician. I wouldn't put anything past you." That night, as they lay tangled together in the aftermath of lovemaking, Eleanor rested her head on Owen's chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart. "A year," she murmured. "A year of building strength, and then perhaps—" "A year," Owen agreed, stroking her hair. "Though I'm perfectly content with just you, Ellie. You know that, don't you?" She raised her head to look at him, her eyes soft in the moonlight filtering through the window. "I know. And that's why I love you, Owen Crawford. You make me feel whole just as I am." The schoolhouse was completed by late August, a simple but sturdy structure with large windows to let in light and air. Eleanor threw herself into preparing for the first day of classes, ordering books from back east, and designing a curriculum that would accommodate the varying ages and abilities of her prospective students. "You're overexerting yourself," Owen warned one evening as she sat up late, writing out lesson plans. "I'm fine," she assured him, though the shadows under her eyes told a different story. "Just excited." But the next morning, Owen woke to the sound of Eleanor coughing a deep, racking cough he hadn't heard in months. He sat up in alarm, finding her hunched over the edge of the bed, struggling to catch her breath. "Ellie," fear laced his voice as he rubbed her back soothingly. When the spasm passed, she leaned against him, exhausted. "Just a bad morning," she whispered hoarsely. "I'll be fine." But she wasn't fine. By afternoon, the fever had returned, and by evening she was confined to bed, her breathing labored and her skin burning to the touch. Owen rode for Doc Williams in a panic, the terrible fear that had receded over the past months rushing back with overwhelming force. The doctor examined Eleanor thoroughly, his expression grave. "It's a setback," he confirmed. "Not uncommon with lung ailments. She's been pushing herself too hard." "Will she recover?" Owen asked, his voice barely audible. Williams sighed. "She's strong and she's beaten worse, but she needs complete rest, Crawford. No school, no housework, nothing but regaining her strength." When the doctor left, Owen returned to Eleanor's bedside, taking her hot hand in his. Her eyes fluttered open, fever bright but aware. "I heard," she whispered. "No school. The children can wait," Owen assured her. "Getting you well is all that matters now." A tear slipped down her cheek. "I'm sorry, Owen. I thought I was stronger." You are strong, he insisted, bringing her hand to his lips. The strongest person I know, and you're going to beat this, just like before. The setback lasted through September, forcing Eleanor to postpone the school opening indefinitely. The ladies of the church auxiliary took turns sitting with her while Owen tended the ranch, bringing meals and company during the long days of recovery. Gradually, as autumn painted the prairie in golds and russets, Eleanor began to improve once more. The fever receded, the cough eased, and by early October she was able to sit on the porch again, wrapped in blankets against the cooling air. "I've been thinking," she said one crisp afternoon as Owen joined her during a break from his chores. "Perhaps I was too ambitious with the school." Owen settled beside her, taking her hand in his. "How so?" "Trying to teach all ages, all subjects," she explained. "It's too much for one person, especially one with limitations." She smiled ruefully. "Perhaps I should focus on the younger children, just reading and basic arithmetic." "At least to start." Owen studied her thoughtfully. "Or perhaps you need help," he suggested. "Mrs. Patterson mentioned her niece is arriving from Illinois next month. She trained as a teacher but hasn't found a position, perhaps between the two of you." Eleanor's eyes lit up with interest. "That could work," she mused. "I could take the younger children, she the older ones, share the burden. And ensure you don't overexert yourself," Owen added pointedly. She squeezed his hand. "I've learned my lesson, husband. I promise to be more mindful of my limits." As Eleanor's recovery progressed, plans for the school were revised. Sarah Patterson, the niece from Illinois, arrived in early November, a capable young woman of 22 with a no-nonsense demeanor that complemented Eleanor's gentler approach. Together, they prepared for a January opening, with a schedule that would allow Eleanor adequate rest between teaching sessions. The first anniversary of Eleanor's arrival in Kansas passed quietly. Owen marked the occasion by presenting her with a locket containing a lock of his hair, a sentimental gesture that brought tears to her eyes. "A year ago, I thought I might have only months," she whispered as he fastened the chain around her neck. And now we look forward," Owen finished for her. "One day at a time." Christmas that year was a more festive affair than their first, with neighbors gathering at the Crawford home for a celebration that left Eleanor tired but glowing with happiness. As they prepared for bed that night, Owen noticed her standing by the window, looking out at the moonlit snow with a pensive expression. "What are you thinking, love?" he asked, coming to stand behind her. She leaned back against his chest, drawing his arms around her waist. "I'm thinking about how fortunate I am," she replied softly. "A year ago, I was just beginning to hope I might have a future. Now I believe it with my whole heart." Owen tightened his embrace, nuzzling the sensitive spot beneath her ear. "I never doubted it," he murmured. "Not from the moment you opened those green eyes and fought to stay." Eleanor turned in his arms, rising on tiptoe to kiss him with a passion that had only deepened with time. "Take me to bed, husband," she whispered against his lips. "I want to celebrate being alive." Later, as they lay contentedly in each other's arms, Eleanor traced idle patterns on Owen's chest. "Doc Williams says I've made remarkable progress," she said softly. "At my last examination, he said my lungs sound almost normal." Owen's heartbeat quickened beneath her fingertips. "Did he mention what we discussed last summer?" he asked cautiously. Eleanor nodded, a smile playing at her lips. "He said we could begin trying if we wished, that there would always be some risk but no more than many women face." Joy surged through Owen, tempered immediately by concern. "And is it what you wish, Ellie? Truly? I meant what I said before. I'm content with just you." She raised herself on one elbow to look into his eyes, her expression serene in the moonlight. "I want your child, Owen. I want to create a family with you, to see your smile in our son's face or your strength in our daughter's hands. I want everything life has to offer us, for however long we have." The school opened in January 1875 with 12 students ranging from 5 to 16 years of age. As planned, Eleanor took the younger children in the mornings, teaching reading, writing, and basic numbers, while Sarah Patterson handled the older students' more advanced lessons in the afternoons. The arrangement worked beautifully, allowing Eleanor to maintain her strength while fulfilling her passion for teaching. Winter gave way to spring, bringing with it the familiar cycle of planting and renewal. Owen expanded his cattle operation, investing in a new bull that promised to strengthen his small but growing herd. Eleanor's garden flourished under her care, providing abundant vegetables for their table and extras to share with neighbors. By late spring, there was new cause for celebration. Eleanor was with child, the promise of new life growing within her, a testament to her recovered health and their enduring love. "Are you afraid?" Owen asked one night as they lay in bed, his hand resting protectively over the slight swell of her abdomen. "A little," she admitted, "but not like before, not the consuming fear of running out of time." She covered his hand with hers. "This feels like a beginning, not an ending." The pregnancy progressed without complications, Eleanor's body proving stronger than anyone might have predicted 2 years earlier. Doc Williams monitored her closely, but even he seemed amazed by her resilience. "You're a medical miracle, Mrs. Crawford," he declared during one examination. Your Boston doctor would never believe his eyes. As summer ripened toward autumn, so did Eleanor, her slender frame now gracefully rounded with the child due in early October. She continued teaching through September, finally relinquishing her duties to Sarah Patterson as her time drew near. "You're glowing," Owen observed one evening as Eleanor sat on the porch, her hands resting on her prominent belly. "Motherhood suits you," she smiled, a serene happiness illuminating her features. "I never thought I'd know this joy," she confessed. "When I stepped off that stagecoach 2 years ago, barely able to stand, I was just hoping for a peaceful place to die." She reached for his hand. "Instead, I found a place to truly live." Their son was born on a crisp October morning, arriving with a lusty cry that brought tears to Owen's eyes as he paced anxiously outside the bedroom, where Eleanor labored with the assistance of Mrs. Wells and Doc Williams. When the doctor finally emerged to announce, "You have a healthy son, Crawford," Owen felt his knees nearly buckle with relief and joy. He found Eleanor propped up in bed, exhausted but radiant, cradling a small bundle wrapped in a soft blanket. She looked up as he entered, her smile brilliant despite her fatigue. "Come meet your son," she invited softly. Owen approached with reverence, sitting carefully on the edge of the bed and peering at the tiny red face nestled against Eleanor's breast. The baby had a shock of dark hair like his own, and when he opened his eyes briefly, revealed a glimpse of what promised to be Eleanor's vibrant green. "He's perfect," Owen whispered, his voice thick with emotion, "just like his mother." "We should name him after your father," Eleanor suggested. "Thomas Crawford has a strong sound to it." Owen nodded, unable to speak past the lump in his throat. Instead, he leaned forward to press a gentle kiss to Eleanor's forehead, then to the downy head of their son, this miracle they had created together against all odds. The years that followed brought changes to the Crawford Ranch. The small schoolhouse expanded to accommodate growing enrollment, eventually requiring a third teacher as Wichita and the surrounding areas developed. Eleanor continued teaching the youngest children, her gentle patience and genuine affection making her a beloved figure in the community. Thomas grew into a sturdy, curious boy with his father's quiet strength and his mother's love of learning. When he was 3, he was joined by a sister, Emma, whose arrival was considerably less fraught with anxiety than her brother's had been. Eleanor's health remained stable, her once fragile lungs strengthened by the Kansas air and a life filled with purpose and love. On the 5th anniversary of Eleanor's arrival in Kansas, Owen surprised her with a trip to a nearby town where a photographer had set up a temporary studio. There they posed for a family portrait, Owen standing tall and proud, Eleanor seated with Emma on her lap, and Thomas standing solemnly between his parents. "For posterity," Owen explained as the photographer prepared his equipment, "so our grandchildren can see how it all began." Eleanor looked up at him, her eyes bright with the same spark that had drawn him to her from the beginning. "From sickness to health," she murmured, "just as we promised." "For all our days," Owen agreed, squeezing her shoulder gently. As the photographer counted down to the exposure, Eleanor reflected on the journey that had brought her to this moment, from a desperate, dying woman to a beloved wife, mother, and teacher. The mail-order bride arrangement that had begun as a practical solution for two lonely people had blossomed into something neither could have imagined that fateful day when Owen Crawford carried her, too sick to stand, across the threshold of what would become their home. The camera's flash captured the image. A family united by love that had grown from the most unlikely beginning, their future stretching before them like the vast Kansas prairie full of promise, hope, and endless possibility. In the spring of Eleanor's 7th year in Kansas, she received a letter that left her sitting quietly on the porch, tears streaming unchecked down her face. Owen found her there when he returned from the fields, immediately alarmed by her distress. "Ellie, what's happened?" he asked, kneeling before her chair. She handed him the letter wordlessly. It was from her former physician in Boston, responding to a letter she had sent months earlier updating him on her health. The doctor expressed astonishment at her recovery, calling it nothing short of miraculous, and requesting permission to document her case in a medical journal, as an example of how climate change and proper care could affect outcomes for patients with severe lung ailments. "He gave me a year to live," Eleanor said softly as Owen finished reading. 7 years ago this month, and look at us now, Owen, look at what we've built together." Owen set aside the letter and drew his wife into his arms, holding her as she wept not from sorrow, but from the overwhelming gratitude of a woman who had been given a second chance at life and had embraced it fully. "I think you should let him publish it," Owen said when her tears had subsided. "Your story might give hope to others." Eleanor nodded against his shoulder. "I will, and I'll tell him it wasn't just the air that healed me." She pulled back to look into his eyes, her own shining with love. "It was finding a reason to fight. It was you, Owen Crawford, and the life we've made together." As the years passed, the Crawford Ranch prospered, as did the school that had grown into a proper educational institution serving the expanding community. Thomas and Emma were joined by a third child, Joseph, born when Eleanor was 35, a surprise blessing that completed their family on cool autumn evenings. Eleanor often sat on the porch with Owen, watching their children play in the yard as the sun set over the Kansas plains. Sometimes she would recall that first difficult journey, the illness that had nearly claimed her life, and the man who had nursed her back to health with gentle determination. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if I hadn't fallen ill on that journey?" she asked Owen one such evening as they watched 14-year-old Thomas teaching little Joseph how to throw a lasso. "If I'd arrived healthy and strong, as you expected," Owen considered the question, his hand finding hers in the gathering dusk. "I'd like to think we would have found our way to each other regardless," he replied, "but there's something to be said for adversity revealing character." He squeezed her fingers gently. "Watching you fight for every breath those first months, it showed me what true courage looks like." Eleanor leaned her head against his shoulder, contentment washing over her. "And here we are, all these years later, the mail-order bride who arrived too sick to stand, and the cowboy who gave her a reason to live." "The best decision I ever made," Owen murmured, pressing a kiss to her temple, "was carrying you over that threshold." As night fell over the Crawford Ranch, the family gathered inside around the fire, Owen and Eleanor, their 3 healthy children, and the promise of many more years together. Outside, the vast Kansas sky filled with stars, silent witnesses to a love story that had defied all odds and blossomed in the heart of the American frontier.